Hey there, I'm Kathy with the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm. Hey, we're just back out in my herb garden by my lavender because I want to share with you how to make some lavender sachets or puffs. Now these I make for people to use either in their drawers, or I usually give them as gifts, or I have been able to sell them in the past at different farmers markets I've been at. But you can also use them in your laundry for dryer sheets. They end up lasting about 20 or so loads, which is kind of nice. But I wanted to share with you the process of how I make these nice puffs. So first, I have this little bit of a sickle that's nice to use. If you have one that has a serrated edge, I find that helps a little bit more. But first things first, all you need to do is take a grouping of your lavender. I like to get a nice big one. And as you can hear, there's bees around, so I don't want to take too much at the moment. Once you have your grouping of lavender in hand, you can actually see there's kind of a base point of where the stem ends and where the leaves start. You want to make sure that you don't go beyond the leaves. You just want to take the bulk of the stems. That way it allows the plant to continue growing throughout the rest of the season. And you take your sickle and simply pull towards you after putting it on the other side. So it's nice and easy to have your bunch. So now that we have our bunch of lavender, I just like to have the ends kind of as even as you can get. And I'll be honest, I go simple. It's kind of with what I have. I happen to have some rubber bands, but you can also use twine or wire if you have any wire. I put it on one of my fingers and simply wrap around the end or the stems of the lavender. And then I simply take it and wrap around the end, and I kind of go both ways. So you'll have two ends, and there you go. You can actually see it's pretty simple. And from there, you can hang it with like a paper clip on a string, or on like you could do it on a clothesline and let them just hang. If you let them hang straight like this, the flowers will hang nice and straight. If you let them dry this way, the stems will start to wilt and kind of hang out. So that's why I always hang them this way. But then at that point, once you have that hung and dry, it usually will take maybe a week to 2 weeks before you can actually have them dry. And this is the last batch that I've had out drying out. And these are still a little bit moist, but this is, you can kind of tell, is a little bit more wilted and still kind of on the edge of drying. So while those are drying, I actually have another stash that I've already gotten the lavender buds in my lavender bud bucket. So here you can see that there's a lot of lavender. And as you can see inside, it's just the buds, and it has some extra leaves, dried leaves, and that sort of thing. And so at this point, I'm able to now use it in other things like my sachets. Here you can see kind of the process of fresh, still drying, and fully dried. And this is what you want to be able to have. And you'll ultimately be able to take out some of these larger stems and pieces and just use the buds. Now, the part of the reason why I like this is you don't have to be perfect in getting all these little pieces out. You can still use some of those as well, but you want to make sure that you don't have any hard, long pieces in your sachets, because as you can see, it's kind of soft. And with the backing that I use, you can still see what's inside. And that is what allows your smell to come through a little bit more, even though the fabric on the front is also, it will allow the fresh scent to come through. You can actually see what's inside here. And so having the long extra pieces is kind of quasi. So now that I'm ready to get set up to sew my sachets, I wanted to kind of point out what I've got as a setup. Essentially, I've chosen just some spare material that I thought would be bright and colorful, and I've cut it down to 3-inch squares. Okay, so you can choose whatever you like. I've used a couple of different varieties, kind of ginghams, cotton, polyesters, silks. So one side I have as this kind of spare material, whatever you choose. I probably wouldn't go with a knit, something that's not as flexible. So something that has a little more give would be best. But then on the back side, I actually have used a iron-on interfacing, and I'll post a picture of kind of what that looks like here at the store. And in person, that's kind of what it looks like. It's rather sheer and thin. I chose this because one, of the cost, it was cheap. Two, it was sheer. And three, you don't have to iron on it. You don't have to use the iron with it, which is kind of a nice thing. And right now, when I just checked online, it was running at Joann's at about 69 cents a yard. I think normally it's $1.29 a yard. But I also use my serger, which is right here. And it ends up, I use the serger because it has, I can do a couple of different edgings with it. And I'll show you that here in a minute, how you can kind of adjust your serger to do two different types of edging. And if you've used a serger before, the basic premise is it's the machine that allows you to have the kind of inside edges of a garment. And so it's not going to be a finished edge like you might see on your jeans, a nice clear crisp line, but rather it has kind of a dual coat because it does have 4 strands of thread at any given time. But again, I'll show you kind of the way I do it, and there's an option to do that. And when I first got my serger, I didn't know that you could move the cutter, and that's what it takes to kind of make the edge that we're going to do today. So pointing out here, normally there is a little piece of metal that's flipped up, but because I've had this set for the way I want to do it, so I just wanted to bring in a little closer. And right here, there's a cutter, and this is what cuts while you serge your material. And I want to let you know that that's something that you can actually shift. So as we're close in to my serger, you'll see that it's like a regular sewing machine with the presser foot here, and you can adjust it back here. But there's a neat little feature right about there that will allow you to cut material as you sew. And it's this little bump right here. And to get at that, because that's what we're going to change. You can use that to cut the edges, but for the pattern of what we're going to do today, so we're going to change the look of the edges from the traditional serged edge, so it kind of gives it a little bit more of a finish. So what you're going to do is simply open up this part, and then open up this side part, and you'll see, as we turn it slightly, this metal piece right here. So this little piece right here is what we're going to shift down. We're going to literally bring it forward. In order to move the piece over here, we need to, in combination, press this button in and that. So this one I'm going to push in, and I have to keep it pressed in. So I have to keep that pressed in and also press the one behind it over here to move the cutter. As I'm pressing in the one piece, you can see it moves there, but I have to move the other one as well to then take this and knock it down. So now you can see it's facing down. So it won't be cutting the material up here, which is what I want to do for this particular stitch. So then I close it up, and there you go. Since I do these in kind of large quantities, I have my setup of material and backing all in one shot. So what I'm going to do is take my material square and my backing, and I don't really have a wrong sides, but this fusing does have a little bit of a coarse side and a kind of a slick side. You can put them either way for what we're doing. And then I just put them together, and so you can kind of see they're just plunked together. It kind of doesn't matter which way. And then I just make sure the edges are lined up. You can kind of see how they kind of line up. And then I just place it down and start sewing. And because I do this in batches, I'll usually do multiples at a time. And when I say multiples at a time, it means I'll do one edge on each puff at a time. So then I'll have, by the time I'm done, I'll have all three sides done to make a pocket. So in this case, I'm starting on side one. Doesn't matter which side. And I just, with my particular serger, it has a little hard time sometimes getting started. So I have to help it by rolling the button on this side to make it go. And I help it go along. And once that's fed through, I actually let it go a little bit longer to have a little bit of a extra set of thread. And then I'll get another one. And this is what I mean that I do multiple. So I'll just keep it going. And on one side, I'll start another one. And then they'll all be linked together. Then I'll pull a third one. And you'll see what I'm doing here in just a minute. This way, I feel like I can get more done as like a lineup of things than if I just did it all, just did each one individually. So for right now, I'm going to let this one be the last one in the lineup. Let my thread go through. And as you can see, I have a bit of a lineup here with my thread. And that's okay. So now I'm just taking my handy dandy scissors and cutting the thread from the machine and any extras. And now you can see that I have 3 that are connected. And that's kind of what I want. Now what I'll do is I'll kind of flip it over and do the other side. And I'll just do the other side so then I can just go snip, snip in between. So let me show you what I mean by that. Now, in a minute, I'm going to have this be attached, all 3 on both sides. Okay? And this just helps me kind of go along a little quicker. Okay, now that I'm all done, it looks like this. So now that I have all 3 done on both sides, this is what it looks like. And you'll say, but they're not individuals, they're attached. How are you going to get the short sides? I'll show you. So this is where I like to go and just, if we clip at this point and at this point, it'll make the ends nice and neat. And then we'll have a little scrap piece of thread. And by doing it this way, you actually quasi-save some thread. So that is the in-between of the 2 squares. And I just toss it on the ground for the time being and clean it up in a bit. And if I did it one at a time, the ends would be a lot longer. These in-between pieces would be a lot longer. And it just works out for me to be a better gig to attach them. So now all we'll have to do is the one last side before filling these up. And now I'm saying the short side, but they're all equally the same width. Each side is the same. There's no real long side and short side. But now we just have one side on each one to sew before we fill them up with the lavender. So you can fill this in a couple of different ways. Usually I have a spoon that I'll spoon it in, or you can take a funnel and kind of funnel it in. But since I just have my hand, you can also just use your hand if you feel like, and kind of take a little bit at a time and put it in the pouch. Now, this is where if you have excess stems and leaves, that you might want to take it out, because they can kind of they can poke through this back piece, but you don't have to. But there are some longer pieces that you might want to just be aware of if you don't get that out before. But if you want to leave them in, you can leave them in too. Usually, I do about 2 to 3 tablespoons per puff of the lavender. And then, that's all. So now I'm just going to serge up the last side, and there it is. It's all done. On this last end, you're going to want to make sure that the contents of this pouch are as far down as they can be, and that you end up having, I like to have this part up so I can see where the lining is, or this thinner material. That way I know where it's not going to go out, and so I carefully put it under, and I'll actually have this side be a little bit, I have to track it a little bit better, and so it'll be the side that ends up maybe looking slightly different than the others, but that's okay. But here we go. Finishing up our easy peasy thing. There we go. Then it's all done. And with a simple, easy cut, we have that piece. So we can trim this up. And then trim up the other side. Just like this. And there you have your puff. And there it is, all done. That is about as easy as you can get. I think the longest thing you have to do, or the hardest thing you have to do, is wait for the lavender to actually dry. That does take a little bit of time, but overall, it takes maybe 15 minutes to make one little pouch. But if you time it right, you can actually make them multiples fairly easy. Like I said, I ended up cutting out multiples of this fabric in this size and multiples of this backing in this size. And then once I got on the machine, all I had to do was like an assembly line sort of thing. Put it together so, put it together so, put it together so. And then flip it over and do the other side. So. Do the third side, and then you can just put it in. You can kind of fill each one up at a time, at the same. Then you can fill them each up and do the last piece at a time. And it ends up being really easy, and they're nice gifts. You can use them for yourself or for other people. And in fact, there's a woman I met up with. I was at an event recently, and she was like, well, I have lavender at home. I can sew. I said, go ahead. Don't buy them from me. I have a video online. And I actually said to her, I have a video that you can see some of the things that you can do with lavender or other herbs. But if you don't feel like making these on your own, I'm sure there's someone near you that has something similar. Or if you don't have lavender plants, a lot of people where I live have lavender plants that you could probably ask politely if you could harvest some. But yeah, so you have an opportunity to go get a lot of lavender from different ways, different sources, or grow your own. And this is just an easy way to use it and give it as gifts if you choose. So I want to thank you for stopping along and checking this out, and hopefully you had a little bit of a crafty day. But there are a number of ways that you can use lavender. This is just one, and I hope you enjoyed it. So if you have a different way of using lavender other than pouches or the tinctures that we've done, let me know below. It'd be great to hear what you do with your lavender. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, and it'd be great to see you again soon. Take care.